Today we're going to look at making the cathead, the carving at the end of the cathead beam or post. And I'm just going to take you through the lesson that is shown in the book, which is really quite simple. In the last quarter of 2023, I was fortunate enough to go to Annapolis, where David Anshel and Greg Herbert put on a course on carving. And much of the tools that you see here today emanated out of that. And the whole purpose of going on that course was at some point in time I was going to have to start doing carving, had no skills, and therefore it was time I started to learn. And what better way to learn than from an expert like David. But before starting to carve miniature, the first thing we have to do is really understand what it is we're carving. And the only way I could figure out how to do that was in fact to start with a large piece and then work my way down until I could eventually start carving at this scale. We start off with a square. It can be a rectangle, a square, it really doesn't matter. And because of the shape of the catheads, David suggests that you cater for the shape of the cathead, which will slightly distort a perfect square. In other words, you need to leave some to be shaved off. I'm going to ignore that for now because we're simply looking at how to construct the cathead. And it's really very simple in terms of the drawings. We line up the corners. And then we put a circle in the center, dead center. You can measure this out, but for this exercise, I'm going to just freehand it. And now you put a line in the center of the square, and that gives you your 8 lines. Now all you do is at the edge of the circle, on the inner circle, you just draw lines. So you're lining up the edge of the circle with the point of the line. So now we've drawn a perfect circle. Now in David's example, he has an outer circle and an inner circle. So he puts a very small dot in the center. So you just put that. And now you carve that out. And the first thing you do is to cut these lines down. So you're going to take this part out, and this part out, this part out, and flatten that down to whatever it is you want to flatten down. So having worked out how we make up the star, we're now going to transfer that drawing onto this piece of mahogany. Now we have the star perfectly drawn out, and the X parts are the parts we're going to take down. And the first thing we're going to do is establish a nice clean line along the edges of the star that we want to keep sharp and clear. Now that it's been nicely marked off, we're going to take the same chisel and really just cut a groove to highlight that line, because we're going to take this all the way down to here. Now this edge is always very vulnerable, so what I found, if you don't want to break the edge, come and put a very sharp chisel on the end. So that you're not putting any pressure on the grain that is here. Later on we're going to take this edge down, but for now we want it to remain nice and clean. So again, you see we're taking this down, so we'll do the rest of it. Now that shape is out, we're going to take this down, and you can use a chisel. You can use some of your carving tools. I'm going to go on the outside shop and just use my router to get it down. So now we've got it, and there are many ways to treat the piece that you've taken down. I'm not going to deal with that. There are many videos on the internet that will show you how to do that. Now we're going to cut out this little circle, and you really should use a bigger gouge than this, but I am into miniature carving, so I have a miniature gouge. And again, it's a nice softwood, a nice sharp gouge, and you just keep going and taking it down. The key to this and all these carvings is an ultra sharp tool. It must go through the wood like a hot knife through butter. I'm also going to give you a little guide on how to protect these edges, and that is to use some thin CA just on the edge, which will tighten up and make it a little harder to carve, but you won't lose the edge if you tighten it up. So now that's done, and now what we're going to do is start to take down each of these angles. Now in David's case, he actually has a ridge, so he has another circle around here to give a little bump. I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to use this ridge, so we're just going to take down each one, leaving the main ridge line at the same height. And I've just stopped carving because I realize this is getting a little dull, so I'm going to quickly put it on the strop and sharpen it up again. So I think this qualifies to be a hot knife through butter. Huge difference between the performance of the chisel. Also notice when I'm going this way, the grain is going the wrong way, so you simply turn it around, and what a difference it makes. The reason I was doing it is, again, I wanted to be careful of the edge. And just look how that chisel goes through the wood. Again, you're using the line and coming down. I just realized I'm using bad practice, so I put on the glove. So if I have a slip, I'm not going to see a new shade of red on this piece. The key to looking at the experts, I'm told, I'm not one of them, is that they always wear protection on their hands, which is why they still have all their fingers. And now we are on the second to last major carving, and that is to take the ends down. So again, that's why, in a sense, we're not too worried that we've lost that. So we're going to actually take these down, because you want a very thin end. You can do this with a chisel, or you can put sandpaper on it and take it down. Sandpaper, of course, will reduce the risk of anything happening to the edge or the tip. And the last thing we want to do is to dig out these little joins here. Get a nice clean join. See, this fellow is telling me you need to sharpen. And we have a special tool for that. This is a sharpening jig, which, if you've been doing carvings, you'll know a little bit about it, and I could feel the ridge in that. See if that's any better. Oh yes. Sharp knife through butter, as we said. So we're bringing these right down to the bottom edge. Now you could put a sharp line if you wanted. I just prefer to do a nice rounded curve. Right, now I'm going to sand these down. So here we go. Still rough and still a lot of work to do, but we have finished it in principle. We continue going on and cleaning it up, and then we'll put a rough surface on these flat areas, some sort of textured surface, and there we have a full-size cathead end. And so, having worked out how we make a cathead, the next challenge is to take it down in scale. So without taking you through too much trouble, here is, again, a mahogany done on this scale, and it came out actually, I think, even better than the big version. Then I decided to move to hardwood, and this was a lot more challenging to do. And then finally, now that I got it down pat, we went to look at our friend here. And here is the cathead, except I couldn't use any of these chisels. It's so small. I actually used the turbo carver. And to do this, I needed, of course, to do it with a magnifying glass. And it's almost impossible to see, but here it is. I could not get the 8 stars. I only got 4. If I can't do better than 4, 4 will actually have to do. But I'm only now starting on this journey of really doing such fine detail work. And I'll continue to persevere with the various gouges that we got on the course, with the turbo carver, with my old Dremel. Believe it or not, all the old tools are going to come out. I don't think there are any sacred animals that can't be used to achieve the goal that we set out to achieve. It's the next day and things are progressing nicely. I've actually completed 10 pieces, each time coming down a little bit smaller. And believe it or not, I'm back up to having the 8 points on the end piece. So what I've done is I've cut a piece slightly bigger than the cathead post, and I've also changed the grain. So instead of having end grain, I'm actually carving a flat surface of the side grain, and that's made a huge difference. I get the best point I can get on the pencil, and then I offset it very slightly. And I try to make sure that I get this perfectly on the corners. And then the same thing with the centerpiece. So there are my 8 points. Now I'm going to take the turbo carver and very gently just cut out a little piece of each star, leaving the triangle intact. The tools I've used are some very small 3-sided files. Obviously, you need a very good desk vise. You need a magnification light, and if you're like me, you need more magnification. The turbo carver really makes this very easy to do, in the sense that it allows you, without stressing the piece, to cut some of the basic shapes, and then you come and refine it with the file. There's just no way I could see me using even these tiny little gouges to work on a piece like this. And again, you may have noticed, instead of a bump in the center of the cathead, I put a hole, because the illusion is what is important. To again get a line for you to see the little 8 triangles, I actually took a chisel and scored the center top of it, which is not really what you should be doing. You should be doing the exact opposite, scoring the valley. But I scored the top of it, put some pencil in it, rubbed it off so that all that's left is the pencil in the groove, and that's allowed me to get the image that I'm trying to get of the cathead. And then finally, I cut the cathead off on the pre-arc, because I have a very thin blade and I don't want to rough it up or have to change the blade on the gimbals. And here you have my catheads all installed, and I can happily move on and start completing the rest of the deck now. I thought you'd enjoy this journey, which is typical of my build, where I don't have a skill and I learned a skill. And again, I could not have done this without David and Greg and that course 2 years ago, which laid the foundation that hopefully when I start to learn to carve all the more difficult pieces at the stern, the skill level would have increased even more than it is already. So again, it's a wonderful journey, and I encourage you to keep modeling, because it's really fantastic when you master something as difficult but as small and insignificant as this. So see you in the next video.